Okay, so I will correct them and try to give it back to you next week. I hope it wasn't too difficult. We have maybe 2 or 1 more pop quiz. Each one counts as 10%. But if we do 4, I'll count 3 of the best. Right. Today I have a little special something for you. There might be one missing. Here, press it down. One here. Press it down. I think there's one missing because I printed 40. So if you don't get one in the back, try and look with somebody else. Yeah. I think it should be enough for just one. Enough except for this one. I'm sorry, if you don't mind looking on. I will upload all. Okay, so listen up. So last week at the end of class, some Japanese students said, I was talking about the final paper, and some people said, oh no, we can't write so long in English. So I'll compromise. So you write 400 English words summary, a good summary, and something 510 Nihongo. Okay? But if you do it in Japanese, I will be stricter probably in terms of the content. Not so much stricter. But do a good job, even if it's in English or Japanese. So you have a choice. Okay? And the paper is due on the 27th of October. July. 27. You have 1 month. And a bit more. This is the general instructions. I will upload a more detailed instructions on the classes and the reading material that you can use. Does anyone not have one? I had an intro there. I had enough. Okay. So the idea is to choose among one of those 5 topics. Some of them we discussed in class, some of them we did in the mini quizzes. So this might be a hint as to what might come up in the next mini quiz. And I want you to make an argument using the textbook and the readings, because we'll have readings outside of the textbook from now. I will assign you articles, okay, short articles, and our lectures. And I want you to show that you've read the book, you've read the readings, and you've listened to the lecture when you write your answers. I don't want you to do something completely different, go find details and information elsewhere, and just use that. And if I can't tell that you've read the book, or the articles, or listened to my lectures, then I'll be concerned. Okay? Try and show that you've read from the Gordon's book. You read, depending on the article, you can do maybe some of them just from Gordon. Okay? Is that clear? Japanese students, okay? Also, I want you to try and look for other material. Not many, but outside of the textbook. Some other articles or websites or government statistics. Some extra material. Extra sources. Extra inyosaki. Okay? The core should be from the textbook and the lectures and the reading. Or maybe 20-30% extra from elsewhere. Where do you get this extra stuff for your ideas? Well, I will give you a list of articles you can look at, or books you can look at. It's a reading list or material. That I will upload to classes. Okay? And the reading material is separated into the different topics. So topic 1, you can look at these books, these articles. Topic 2, so it's easy for you. You don't have to go look for everything by yourself. Is that clear? So try and use that as well. You're free to find other material in Japanese or in Chinese, French, any language. Try and find other material to support your argument. I want you to make an argument to answer this question, but it has to be evidence. Okay? Backed with evidence and sources. Okay? ただ主張するだけじゃなくて、主張の根拠とソースをちゃんと示しなさい。Okay? 示しなさい。So, the idea is not just your feeding, it's not just your console, it's 根拠だった議論。Okay? So you have data, you have evidence. And show where you got the evidence. どこからそれを引っ張ってきたか、どこから引用してきたかをちゃんと示さない。その文中の中に。Don't just put a bibliography. 参考文献だけ最後につけるんではなくて、文中の中に各パラグラフ、引用したところのすぐ後に、脚注でもいいですけど、sorry, I'm using Japanese just to make it clear for Japanese students. Put the sourcing in this APA in-text citation. I don't know if you've used it before, but it's a style where the source is inside the text, inside the paragraphs. It's a parentheses, the family author name, and then the year of the publication, and then the page number. Anybody done that before? APA style? Good, okay, so the foreign students have done it. The idea is if you quote some idea or some evidence or some statistics, then you put in the quote, you put after the statement, parentheses, the author of the family name of the author. So for example, Davidson or Tanaka. Year that it's published, okay? 出版年数, 1999. And then column, and then page number. If you've never done it before, you can find how to do it in the APA style guide, which I will include in the instructions I upload. This is just general. You look at the instructions, more careful instructions in the file that I upload to classes. Is that clear? So sometimes I get students who write a whole essay, there's no 引用元, there's no capture, there's nothing. And then 最後に参考文献, just a bibliography. That's no good. That will get -10, -20. I have to know in the text, where are you citing? Where are you borrowing ideas or evidence? Okay? Understood in Japanese students? Okay? Okay? It's important. Yes?
I guess many citations from the textbook.
Yes.
Is that okay?
That's okay. That's okay. Just show it's practice too. You know, one argument, one data, you say Gordon, 2012, page 15, page 216. It's fine.
So it's called the Chicago Model style.
Yeah, basically APA. If you do different style, if you do capture, if you do footnotes, if you do some of that, it's fine. I want you to do APA style. The most important thing is you have sourcing. ちゃんと引用していること。ちゃんと引用っていうか、ちゃんとそのソース元を示していること。それが一番重要。スタイルはともかく言いませんが、それどこからそのデータを持ってきたのかわからないと大変問題になります。Yes? I can't, it's difficult to count. So, bibliography is not, but the in-text citation is included in the 2000 English words. Okay? Okay? So, このやり方だと文章の中に、引用元を示して、最後に参考文献をまた書くと。でどうなったというと、文章読んでる中で、どこからこの議論、どこからこのデータ、どこからこのアイデアが持ってきたか、引用されているのかがすぐに分かるわけですよ。参考文献だけ見ると、この本読んだんだねっていうことしか分からなくて、議論の中でどこ使われてるか分からないじゃないですか。 だからあんまりそのアカデミックではないというかプリサイスではないやり方なんで、この方法をちょっと学んでください。So the idea is to learn how to write academic piece. I'm not going to be so. This is not very high level. Well, you can please try hard and make a good argument, but do the basics. If you do the basics, make an argument, make an introduction, explain here, right? It has to be a clear statement of your arguments in the introduction. The body must support the argument with evidence. Data. You have to show that you've read the textbook, you've listened to the lectures, you've read some of the articles I suggested you read. And then you do citation well. If you do those basics, you'll pass. If you do them very well, you'll get an A. Okay? And it's not going to be so difficult, I think. But if you don't follow instructions, there's no clear introduction statement, there's no evidence in the body, it's not cited, then I'll be very strict. The other thing is format and also style of writing. Try to make it very clear. Very, very simple language. Use simple language, short sentences. Especially in English, use active verbs. Don't have sentences that go on for 3 lines or 4 lines. The shorter, the simpler, the better. Use easy language, fine, but difficult ideas. Okay? So choose one of the 5 topics here. If you don't like the 5 choices, you'd want to do something else, you come to me and we can discuss. It's no problem. Usually I say, yes, go ahead and do that topic. But the same rules apply. You have to show that you've read the book, textbook, articles. You have to also show that, you're making an argument with evidence. So, 議論する。記述するじゃなくて議論するね。記述 is to describe. これが起こって、これが起こって、これが起こって、これが起こって。どうしますだから、こういうことがあったからこういう結果になった。そういう因果関係を示す。だからなんか議論だってする。これとこれを比較するとこっちの方が良かった。何かしらの議論をしなきゃいけない。よく日本の学生が記述だけしてるわけですよ。この年こういう結果があってこういうことだった。それだったら、argue。議論と記述の違いをちゃんと理解しながらやってください。Okay. How do you submit the article? Well, your essay, you submit to this Dropbox link. It's a very long link. It says dropbox.com request. If you go to this site, it says upload, and you can upload your Word article, Word document. Please use Word document. It could be these other free open file or whatever. You can use that, but it has to be readable. I will upload this thing on Classes as well, so you can just link. You don't have to copy this. Okay? Deadline 27th. Each day is late, minus 2 points or minus 4 points out of 70. After 5 days, I don't accept. Don't go over 5 days late. Okay? If you have some dying reason, I don't know, some kind of very, very important reason, like whatever, just contact me. If you're sick or if you have some emergency, contact me. Now this is the special nice part about me, is that you can send a draft, so-called, to me 10 days before the deadline. If you're worried, 大丈夫かな、これで大丈夫かな、これ通るかなと思ってたら、10日前に you can send me a draft. I'll look at it and I will give you a preliminary grade feedback. And also, if you submit this as it is, you'll get this many points. Okay? And if you're happy with that result, if you're happy with 30 out of 35, then you don't have to send a final. You can just say, this will be my final. Is this clear? Okay? Raise your hand if you understood. Understood? Understood, Japanese students? So it's a very nice system, right? You get a first trial. So do a good job, follow instructions, and you will pass. Work hard and make an effort, you'll get an A. Slack off, think that, Hijino is not going to be so strict, he seems to be so nice, I won't pass you. I've failed other people who sent in things that are not following instructions, is a mess. Just the cut, copy, paste, don't just do copy, paste. That's not just failing, it will be an academic problem. Okay? 教説ですかね。don't plagiarize. I can tell immediately. The English is crappy, and then suddenly it becomes really good English, and then it becomes crappy again. What's going on? Okay. And then the file name has to be like this: Hijino, Ken, or whatever, Tanaka, Yoshitonaka, Ryuji, whatever, JPE. That should be the file name. So I know family name, first name, and then Japan Political Economy. Okay. If you want your feedback and graded paper back to you, the final paper, you must write your email somewhere. Otherwise, I can't send it back to you. Okay? So if you want your paper and the grade back, write your email. If I don't have your email, I'll just give you a grade, and then you'll get the grade at the end of the term. Okay. That's all. So I will upload this. I will also upload a list of readings, and I also upload more details on how to do citation and how to argue. Okay? What you should do when you argue academically. It's in English, but it's very useful for your brain to learn how to argue and construct papers. Maybe you're not social scientist or bunke or whatever, but even if you're a natural scientist, you should learn to put a new argument into a written format in a clear, succinct way. Very useful, especially when you apply for applications, I don't know, or we have proposals. It's very important to be able to write. In Japanese or English, it's all the same. Clear, structured, well evidenced arguments. Okay, any questions? Yes, sir.
JPE2 or JPE, which is correct?
Sorry, I don't know what that 2 is for. Just drop the 2. Thank you for the notice. Yes?
Do you have to use like specific fonts like Times New Roman, or
Can you speak louder?
do you have to use like specific fonts like Times New Roman?
Font.
Yeah.
Font, okay, font. Yes, very good question. Times New Roman is good. Times New Roman 12. But since I didn't write it here, I won't subtract points for not having Times New Roman. Try to make it neat, right? Sometimes people have margin, you know, 日本語なんていうんですかね。
余白
横枠
余白
余白がこうバラバラになってたりとか、フォントの大きさがバラバラだったりとか、汚いわけですよ。それで見るの大変硬いんで、形を整える、フォーマットを整える、それが前提であって中身を見ますから、中身がどれだけ良くても、フォーマットと形ができてなかったら、もうプロフェッショナルの仕事としてはアウトですから、まあ大学プロフェッショナルじゃないと、そういうことを学びましょう。So, good point. So, Times New Roman 12, make sure the margins are adjusted. It's easy to read. Okay, I'm giving you all these instructions, but just for now, so that you know what's going to happen. As I said, I'm very nice, so you can send me a draft by the 17th of July. I will look at it and try and get it back to you in 3 days. So it's fair. Yes.
How many direct citations can we use?
Okay, direct citation in quotation marks, try to make it less than 20% of the whole paper. Don't have quotes, long 直接引用. Direct quotes, I don't know, under 20%, a fifth. There's not so many words anyway, it's only 2,000 words, or 3,500 日本字数, so そんなタラタラと他の人引用してたらすぐ終わっちゃうでしょ。自分の議論ができない。Good. I hope it's clear. If you have any questions, or if you want a different topic, just come to me. Since this is the main way I'm going to grade you, I'm trying to make it as clear and open as possible, so you know what's going to happen, right? So it's fair. Okay, so good luck. Who's going to write in Japanese? It's not a problem. Yeah? Okay? Good. Who's going to write in English? Okay. That's fine. If you're unsure, you can. I mean, I won't penalize for. If it's understandable, even if the grammar is not perfect or the language is not perfect, I won't minus. I look at the format and the arguments and the evidence. Okay. Of course, it has to be clear. Good. Good. So good luck. You should start on it. Because there's 1 month and a few days left. Okay, so where are we now in the world of Japanese political economy? So one more question. Who's writing an English essay, 2,000 words for the first time? Okay. Who's written something 500 paper? Okay. So Japanese students have done it in Japanese, but not in English. Do you have other long English papers to write for this term? Who has a? Yeah. Okay. Is 2,000 words very long, or is it average? Average. Okay. This is the first time I allow Japanese writing in Japanese, so I have never I work in Japanese, so it should be no problem. Anyhow, good luck. So today we're going to talk about the last part of the textbook, the last chapter. Are you finished? Are you leaving? Why? What?
I didn't bring money to Namkan. I will be in the
Excuse me?
It's a personal situation.
Okay. Try not to just come for exams.
Yes. I have been coming.
Good. See you later. I've had the experience of Japanese students, or not just Japanese students. People come in, they do the exam, then they leave immediately. Okay? Right, so this is the last chapter, which includes what's the big thing that happens in the last chapter of Gordon's book? What's the big events?
Lemon shock.
Lemon, not lemon, Lehman. Not the lemon shock, but the Lehman shock, yes, and? Earthquake, which also includes the Fukushima Daiichi accident. And also, what else is focused on in this chapter? Political change. What's the big political change that happens that's discussed in this chapter? Huh? LDP does this? What is this? No, you have to use language. We're not sign language here. You have to learn to speak in full sentences. Every students always just go LDP or earthquake or TPJ. I mean, you just say a full sentence. I'm not gonna attack you. Yes.
There is a political shift of power.
Yes. DPJ. Very good. At least you made a full sentence. There's a political shift to the DPJ. So 3 shocks. One with the Lehman shock, then the earthquake, or before the earthquake, DPJ, Democratic Party of Japan, and then the earthquake. Are the 3 connected? Kind of. Who would say they are connected? Yeah. You can always make an argument that these things are connected. Some would say they're not connected. But they have interaction. Okay. So these shocks that we mentioned, and also the return of the LDP, right, in 2012. It's already been 5 years since the LDP has returned. And so the textbook ends around 2011, 12? The textbook ends before the LDP returns to power, right? We'll talk a little bit about Abe administration. You have lots of different kinds of challenges throughout this period. Although we were very pessimistic in the last 2 classes, right? What's pessimistic? What does pessimistic mean? Here, what does pessimistic mean? Yes, you. Ikanteki. What's ikanteki in English? Pessimistic. You're not so confident or hopeful about the future. So last 2 classes was, Japan is terrible, Japan is going down the drain, lost decades, ikanteki. But with Abe coming to power in 2012, it became a bit optimistic, right? Japan wins the Olympics bid for 2020. Abenomics, the stock market goes up, yen gets weaker, which is a good thing for Japan usually. or the yen gets weaker. So there's kind of optimism, but I don't know. After 5 years, this optimism is not really delivering in real substantial benefits for a lot of people. So there's a lot of frustration, I think, still. We'll talk about that. So then we have this question, have the lost decades ended? We had this pessimistic period. The statistics and the figures suggest the economy is weak. Things are getting out of hand. But then it seems Abenomics and other government policies have taken Japan out of the last decades. Is it true? Okay, look at these things. So, what's the Lehman crisis? We won't go into the technical details. It's very complicated. There are many interesting movies about the Lehman shock, Hollywood movies recently. The Big Short. It's a really good film. If you're interested in these kind of technical aspects of finance and also the emotional aspects of high finance. Essentially, the banks were lending money to borrowers, individuals who wanted to build houses, mortgages, and these borrowers didn't have proper jobs or didn't have proper income. They borrowed too much, and people were building all these houses all over the States, funded by what was called subprime mortgages. Basically, mortgage debts, loans that are very poor, crappy. You don't expect them to be paid back. But the banks and the finance sector kept on lending and creating these financial products out of them. Tranches, and I don't know what they're called. And it led to the bankruptcy of a big investment bank called Lehman Brothers, and also other smaller banks were very unstable, and it triggers a global financial crisis. Credit markets paralyzed, which means that banks are not lending to other banks. There's a sharp contraction, and interest rates soar, and everybody's panicking, and everybody thinks it's the end of the world and end of modern finance or banking system. I won't try and explain how this works. Too complicated. I'm not sure I even understand how it works. But the result is the Japanese, among all countries, GDP slows down, exports collapse because countries are buying, the GDP shrinks very rapidly in the last quarter of 2008. Last quarter, the year is divided into different quarters, shihanki. So immediately after the Lehman shock, you have this very poor situation. Unemployment increases in Japan after this, in the first year or so, I guess, 5.5%, which is not very high compared to, say, the EU and Germany, EU and US. But anyhow, it's an economic and financial crisis hits Japan as well, into the real economy, in terms of employment, in terms of export sales, in terms of GDP growth. One of the outcomes of this, I don't know if you students remember this, in 2008, 9 years ago, so you were still 10. But they had this thing called the Hakemura, Toshikoshi Hakemura, which is where all the people who worked as contract labor, not full-time labor, those who were on short-term contracts, especially for the manufacturing industry, suddenly, because all the companies had a slowdown of orders, they fired a lot of these short-term contract workers. And a lot of them were not just fired, they had to leave the company dormitories. They didn't have money to pay for their rent. So they became homeless. 400,000 dispatched jobs to be lost. Some of them, not all of them, couldn't pay rent, and they had to find a place to go. So they ended up homeless, and in the end of 2008, this was a kind of a political and social movement as well. They all gathered in Hibiya Koen in Tokyo, in the center of Tokyo, and they had, free food and free for New Year's. In Japan, it's very important to celebrate New Year's with your family and to, nice food and to have kind of relaxing time. This is the main holiday, and these homeless people didn't have anywhere to go, so they decided, a number of organizers and NGOs decided to provide a place to stay and some food, and this became a village, so-called. So it became Hakemura. And what it did was there was so much reporting on the news about this. Maybe you remember. This really highlighted this idea of Japan becoming a class society. It's becoming a very insecure job situation, and sort of the problem of non-regular workers. And it also raised questions about too much deregulation, Western style capitalism, or Western style, Anglo-American style, finance-driven capitalism, and neoliberal policies. Although we've forgotten a lot of it already. At the time, it was a big in the news, and people were discussing a lot about Kaksa Shakai, very much. It started on 2007. People were discussing in the news, and politicians as well, talking about this new divided society. Of course, did it make any change in the world of dispatch contract labor? A little bit. After the DPJ came to power, they changed the a little bit, so that manufacturing industries and some industries, there was a limit to how much you can hire contract laborers, and a time limit, and some jobs you couldn't keep on hiring people for short-term contracts. Anyhow, outside of Japan, looking into Japan, or not really looking into it, looking at themselves, the US, Germany, Europe, after the Lehman shock, they started to think in terms of the situation they were in. And the situation they thought was similar to Japan in the 1990s. Japan had a financial crisis, a banking crisis we talked about, right? The bad loan crisis after the bubble bursting. So these countries outside of Japan, who's this? Who's this? Well, you remember. The American flag, EU flag, German flag. The idea is turning Japanese. The idea is that it's not just Japan that suffers this kind of financial crisis, banking crisis, and then low growth, deflation. Europe was entering in deflationary period, US too. And so everybody said we should start to look to Japan, study Japan, how Japanese did or did not overcome their financial banking crisis in the 90s. So there was a sentiment that, oh, the world is catching up to Japan in a sense. Japan isn't unique in its mess, and it proved very difficult, both for the US and Europe, to overcome the Lehman crisis. It was 3, 4, 5 years, I think, until economies started to pick up. Even now, one could argue. The US a bit more quickly, and Europe maybe just now finally has gone over the euro crisis, because you suffered euro crisis. Okay. Japan recovered actually quite quickly from the Lehman crisis, comparatively quickly, and started growing faster than the US or Eurozone by per capita. So they talk about the global shock of the Lehman crisis. It's varied depending on the country. Some countries overcame the shock faster than others. Okay, so that's the Lehman shock. But what it did was it highlighted the problems of Anglo-American finance, unregulated finance, and questioned too much deregulation, questioned too much inequality. After Koizumi, we see, this is in the political field, we talked about last week a little bit, we had 3 prime ministers, very short, Abe 1 year, and then Fuda 1 year, Asa 1 year. As we talked about, thanks to the policies of Koizumi, essentially, reduced support for rural areas, reduced spending on construction, public works. So the farmers and farming areas are moving away in terms of support for LDP. There's a lot of concern about inequality under Koizumi and regional inequality. And of course, the Lehman shock, as I said, highlighted this question. So many unregulated workers with no security. Is it fair that these people work 10 and 12 hours a day, and then after, 3, 4 years, and then suddenly the company decides they're going to fire them and they get fired? Is this a fair system? So the book talks about it in detail. There was a questioning about, is this the right way we should be going? Political power is shifting away from LDP. In 2007, the DPJ wins control over the upper house. And this was mainly thanks to getting support in the countryside. And because there was so much frustration against Koizumi's policies of Samittai Kaikaku and Shihou Kiriste, so getting rid of the, not paying enough attention to the countryside. There's some other things like pensions crisis that we talked about last week, and LDP support comes to very low levels, and everybody says LDP has to go out. The DPJ it emerges as a very strong opposition party. This is Ozawa, this is Hatoyama, the first prime minister. Ozawa, as you recall, was the guy who split the LDP in 1993, 1992. He's always destroying political systems. And they get a lot of support, especially because people are so unhappy about the LDP. I think a lot of it has to do with a lack of confidence and kind of wanting to get rid of it. In the manifesto, this is for 2009 elections, they promise a lot of things. Promise money for families with children, free highways, inefficient and wasteful projects like big dam projects. What else? And basically ending LDP rule. This was their main goal in the manifesto. This is their main promise, which is a bit strange. I mean, all parties in opposition, they want to change government. So it's kind of saying this is our goal is to change government. I mean, that's of course is one would expect. Anyway, they have a sweeping victory. They have a very, very strong victory in 2009. Hatoyama becomes prime minister. You can see here, this is in 2005. LDP and DPJ. LDP had 296 seats. DPJ only 100. And in 2009, DPJ had 308 seats. LDP has 119 seats. And then back to 2012, LDP has 294 seats. LDPJ is basically decimated. It's wiped out. So rather stable and then very volatile. So what we're seeing in Japanese politics is more and more volatility, change in vote share and seat share, which is happening in all over the world, but in Japan you're seeing it quite dramatic. Okay, when 2009 election happened, August, this is September 5th, 2009. The vote that changed Japan, Dokkan, well, it's going to be a big change. And there's a lot of hope. Hope that things will become better, right? Finally, the post-war political system, the 55 system is destroyed. Everything is going to change. People said this is finally the arrival of healthy two-party democracy. Finally, we're seeing change in power. Now Japan is becoming a more normal democracy. What DPJ promises. But very quickly, the DPJ has all kinds of crises. DPJ is very, very proven to be very poor at delivering its promises and also to deal with crises. It is unable to deliver on a lot of things because it's hit by financial finance scandal, Hatoyama. It realized that it doesn't have enough money. It cannot generate the kind of money it needs to deliver on all these things that it promised to. One of the big promises was to move the US base, air base in Futenma, Okinawa, outside of Okinawa. And they promised that, Hatoyama promised that, without really consulting with the party, without really consulting with anybody before the election. Then when they came to power, they realized it's not so easy. They have to deal with the US. The US doesn't wants to keep them or wants to move to Enoho Nago, which is now in problem. So it was very difficult. And Okinawan people were very happy. They're very excited. Oh, finally we can get rid of the US base. So a lot of anticipation, but in reality, very soon, 3-4 months after being elected, the DPJ government is backtracking. Backtrack means to hogosuru, to not deliver on promise. 2010 is also a turning point. The LDP take back the upper house. Okay, and when you don't control both the lower house and the upper house, what happens? You have gridlock. You cannot pass laws. In Japan, most laws, you have to have the upper house agree. So this slows down. Like the LDP in 2007, when it lost control of the upper house, it became a government crisis. Okay? And their popularity fell because the government was seen as not able to deliver. Same with the DPJ in 2010. We have what is called legislative gridlock. 議会のねじれ、議会が動かなくなっちゃう。So there's a perception of DPJ to deal effectively, and there's also the Fukushima Fukushima Daiichi accident, and also the earthquake, which is not DPJ's fault, but how the DPJ responded to it was seen as very ineffective and chaotic. One of the biggest crises in Japanese history, especially the nuclear crisis, and the DPJ was seen or perceived and described as being ineffective. Okay? I don't know if LDP would have done any better. Okay, and some other things. Other challenges, the challenges from China on Senkaku Islands or Diaoyu Islands, promises to raise consumption tax when they said they're not going to raise consumption tax. So all these things added up, and the support rate of the DPJ fell very quickly and stayed low. And there was a lot of infighting within the DPJ. So very unfortunate that the first party to come to power after very long rule of LDP is this very, very ineffective government. Okay, 311. What's 311? Not 9/11, but 311. Somebody tell me what 311 stands for? Huh?
Earthquake of West Japan.
Yeah, the earthquake, the date of the earthquake, March 11th. Okay. It's the most powerful earthquake in recorded history in Japan and probably recent history, modern history. Magnitude 9, it was 100 times greater than the Great Kanto earthquake, which killed 100,000 people. The destructions of buildings and homes were limited, but the tsunami that followed, because a lot of the homes and buildings in Japan have very strict earthquake regulations, building regulations to make it anti-earthquake or earthquake proof. So not so many of them collapsed. The problem was the huge tsunami that followed, 10, 12, 13 meters, some 30 meters high in some places. They overcame the seawalls and flooded inland, sometimes in 1 or 2 kilometers inland, which is a serious problem. The death toll, this was in May 2014, 25,000 people died. 90% of them drowned, only 5% by crushing. Okay, most of the casualties in the Tohoku, Iwate, Miyagi, and Fukushima. Terrible pictures, I don't know if you've seen them, you can see the tsunami coming. This was 6 years ago. But the biggest problem, well, not the biggest problem, but one of the major complications was that the tsunami affected nuclear power plant on the coastline in Fukushima. It destroys a cooling system. You need to cool a nuclear power plant, constantly cool, and you have to have generators that send cold water through the plant. These generators stop because they get flooded. Okay. In the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. There's an explosion of the nuclear core or generator, and then there's a meltdown of the nuclear fuel rods, and radiation is released. And you can read more about this. I'm sure you know about it if you're interested in a lot more details. So much so that there's certain areas that you can't live in. They have been trying to clean it up, but there's still areas where you cannot go in because there's too much radiation. And radiation, you get reports of radiation leaking out of the plant into the water and through, not so much in the air now, but in the water and into the sea. And you hear reports occasionally. Although the Japanese government has said it's under control, it seems to be occasional leakage. Very difficult to control. Nobody has died from radiation yet, immediately. Right? But it creates lots of fears, right? Lots of concerns, because you can't see it. You don't know what the effect is, and the effect is long term. So millions of people are very concerned, and of course, even I lived in Osaka back then, and then I went to Tokyo. But a lot of my people who are overseas business people living in Tokyo, many of them left that I know. Many people are seriously saying they should go and live in Kansai or in Kyushu because the food and the air and the water is less polluted. I know some families who live in Kyoto around my house in northern Kyoto who have come from Tokyo because after the earthquake because they want to avoid what they think is radiation. The science is not going to be conclusive, but I think the risk of getting very sick from radiation being in Tokyo is not very high. Having a beer and smoking cigarettes is probably much more of a risk. Okay. In any case, 90,000 people in Fukushima were forced to evacuate their homes because of the radiation. 2 million. So that's quite a big percent. That's, I don't know, 100,000, so about 5% of the population had to leave. Some had to leave the prefecture, and they're housed all over Japan in these temporary housing. Okay, many of them have returned. Some of them have returned. Some of them have decided not to ever return. During the crisis, which happened March and April, the Prime Minister at that time, Naoto Kan, said this is the nation's most severest crisis since World War II. Okay, and Emperor Akihito, he delivered a TV broadcast, which was the first time that the emperor delivered a direct broadcast in a crisis, telling the Japanese people to stay united and stay calm and do not give up hope. And he also praised the self-defense force. So you can see the gravity of the situation. And I think at the time when the nuclear power plants in Fukushima were not completely under control, there was a risk that the nuclear fuel rods there, not just the explosion, but the fuel rods would start burning. And if that starts burning and you have a nuclear fire, I understand that could probably make it impossible to live in northern Japan and Tokyo. Tokyo has to be evacuated. It was very lucky that it didn't catch on fire and it got contained. But it was very scary. I went to the Swedish embassy to get the iodine tablets. The embassy was passing out yodo. You need yodo if you have cesium, and so you don't get the cesium radiation in your gallbladder. What is this called? This part of your body. Anyway, some tablet to, if in case the radiation started traveling towards Tokyo, for me and my children. So it was rather scary. Okay. You can see that Fukushima is not so far away from Tokyo. 100 kilometer, 200 kilometer, 300 kilometer. Just outside of Tokyo. And I think the winds at the time when there was the explosion was blowing this way. This is the exploded reactor, Fukushima Daiichi plant, I guess. And that's the explosion. So March 14, so 3 days, 2 days. What's the result politically and economically? Well, lots of outcomes, of course, you can imagine. Japan depended on nuclear power about 30%, 25%. But all the power plants had to stop. Afterwards, nuclear plants had to stop. And there was a lot of protest against the electricity companies, against the government regulators, saying, we've been warning against this, and this is unacceptable. The risk of nuclear power plants is too high. Different kind of government commissions did investigation into why the accident happened, what could have been done, who was to blame. It became very, there were no particular individuals named, although heads of the electricity company, I think they're sued. But the analysis was there was a kind of village, nuclear village in Patsumura. All these people, the scientists, the electricity companies, the media even, who got a lot of money from the electricity companies to advertise, bureaucrats who were involved in nuclear power, they all came together and tried to create this myth that nuclear power is completely 100% safe. And they continued it, and they pushed for nuclear power as an important source of energy. Why? Because their jobs depended on it. They're part of this vested interest of keeping nuclear power in play. And so there was no clear checking accountability mechanism. Very interesting to study why this kind of situation occurred. Of course, those on the side defending nuclear power said nobody could predict such a big tsunami. 30 meters, 40 meters. Never happens. It happens maybe 1 in 100,000 years. And they would say that we had sea defenses, we had all these defenses. But those criticizing the defenders would say, well, actually there were reports, internal reports saying if there's a big tsunami, there'll be a problem in terms of keeping the generators cool. So, I don't know. I think you have to make your own judgment, but I would say that the nuclear power plants did not invest enough, the electricity companies did not invest enough in preventing this kind of thing from happening, and they knew there was a chance, however small, it was happening. And I think they didn't realize how dangerous it is if there is a major nuclear accident. And this was probably possible because there wasn't a very strict media. The media was not, the mainstream media wasn't paying enough attention. A lot of them, the newspapers and TV companies, they were given a lot of advertising money from the big electricity companies, so they were not critical enough. The public are pissed off though. There are protests, major protests across Japan, major protests whenever the government tried to restart nuclear power plants in Tokyo and also locally. Okay. There were 57 nuclear power plants before 2011 accident, which some were on, some were off. Most of them were running. Now there are only 52. Now there are only 5 power plants, 10% that are running. The rest are stopped, or they're going to be closed. Okay. The government wants to restart quite a few more, but it's been very difficult because there's a lot of resistance locally, even a little bit from the judiciary, from the courts, but mainly because of governors and also local protests. And it's very unpopular. I think the majority of Japanese public do not want nuclear power plants to start. Japan is a small country, has lots of earthquakes, and there isn't room to store all the nuclear waste. Okay, so that's that. The DPJ had all these problems, and by 2012, they call an election because they promised to raise consumption tax. They suffer a catastrophic means shimeiteki, loss. Okay? They win only 1/4 of the seats. They had 300 becomes 60 seats, so even less than a quarter. And LDP gains a massive majority, a very big number of seats, led by Abe Shinzo, who's back, who's in power now. And this was one of his posters before the 2012 election. This is Nihon o Torimodosu. What does that mean? It means, well, literally, it means take back Japan. The question is, who is going to take back Japan? What are they going to take back? For whom are they going to take back? Anyhow, how this was described or understood is there was a kind of politics of nostalgia, going back to a Japan, an earlier Japan, a golden era where not a real golden era, I don't know, kind of fictitious golden era, where Japan is more competitive economically, it's more stable, there's more confidence, there's more, how should I say, optimism for the future, and restoring Japan's, I don't know, traditions and values and cultures. But it's not very clear what the LDP is saying here. But it is a kind of conservative vision. It's not so important. You can see in 2012, LDP takes 294 seats. And once again, in 2014, they do another election. They do very well. And not only does, this is all LDP, you have the Komeito, which is their partner still. And then you have this new party. This is the Green Slope. And then this new orange party called the Ishin no Kai, Ishin no Toka, which was led by the Osaka Governor and Mayor Hashimoto Toru. And this is also more right-wing than LDP, more conservative in some areas, and quite neoliberal, pushing for deregulation and decentralization. Okay. and some changing the constitution. So it's the swing to the right is very strong in Japan here, and here as well. Japan Abe is elected, and the whole world is wondering what's going to happen to Japan next. 2009, it was the big explosion, hope for change. Japan is changing, and then it became a big mess with the DPJ. And then Abe is returned to power, and he's depicted as Super Abe, like Superman. Is it a bird? Is it a plane? No, it's Japan. Abenomics, nationalism, and challenge to China. Essentially, Japan is recovering its stamina and pride and aggressiveness thanks to Abe and his Abenomics. There's an upbeat narrative which the government pushes in speeches, important speeches around the world, in the Davos conference, in different think tanks. Abe makes the speeches. He says, Japan will never be a two-tier country. That's an important message I'm here to make. I reiterate this by saying, I'm back in social Japan. So all this grandstanding, all this advertising that Japan is great, Japan is back, Japan is not going to be the mess that it was under DPJ. Another speech, Japan is not the land of the setting sun. He talks a lot about the Olympics, how great it is that the Olympics is returned. And of course, consciously focusing on Japan as being part of the countries of democratic rule of law, Western values, which is in contrast, of course, to China. So the alliance with the US and the Western countries. It's a bit of a mess now because of Trump, but anyhow, he has all these he has all this enthusiasm, optimism, but there's a lot of challenges left for Abe domestically. Let me just see how much time we have. Oh, what kind of challenges? Well, this is the ones that have been weighing down Japan for a long time. The problem of aging population, lack of young people, lack of working population, low economic growth, expanding social security costs, especially pensions and healthcare, and the problem of debt, increasing debt, inequalities across all kinds of cleavages. Nuclear power, what to do with nuclear power? They inherited the mess of Fukushima and the LDP, and Abe wanted to very ambiguously, but at the heart wants to restart a lot of the nuclear power plants, but the public is not happy with it. The desire to encourage women in the workplace, economics, so all these things they have to work on. International challenges, we'll just do that later. We'll focus then on Abenomics. His first, I should say, even before the elections, Abe was talking about implementing these economic reforms. Abenomics. 3 arrows. Loose monetary policy, so the government spending, government lowering the interest rate to zero and beyond zero to encourage banks to borrow and for companies to borrow and spend. So loose monetary policy. Aggressive fiscal spending, which means spending more government money, essentially public works. So under DPJ and under Koizumi, they had stopped spending all this money on public works. Now he says, we're going to spend lots of money. And targeted growth strategy, so deregulation of certain sectors. So that was the idea, to pull Japan out of deflation. And in the beginning, when he first came to power, the yen weakened considerably. The stock market surged. You can see the general the composite index for how the economy is doing. This is all kinds of different indicators overall to see how Japan's economy is doing. This is not GDP, but various indicators. And you can see from 2002 to 2007 under Koizumi, 73 months of growth, and then this is 100, so it has to be above. It's very poor under DPJ. It gets better under Abe, and so there's Abenomics Keiki, so-called, of 60 months. I don't remember how many months of positive economic indicators. So it seems as if the economy is doing. The macro indicators seem to be improving. Companies are earning more profits. The stock market is doing well. Companies are investing more. Although we had a consumption tax in 2014, which lowered slow growth. But the problem is, despite the macro indicators, that is how companies are doing, stock markets doing, how the banks are doing, it doesn't link up with how the people are feeling about their condition. So-called KPG. How individuals feel whether their personal economic situation is improving. And I have two data sets here, 2014 and 2016 October. And they ask polls of voters, how do you feel about Abenomics? Most of them don't support Abenomics. Why? Because they don't feel it. What don't they feel? Well, they don't feel their salaries increasing. They don't feel that their livelihoods are getting easier. Things are getting more expensive, work hours are long, salaries haven't really improved. This 84% is from Yomiuri, October 2014. So Yomiuri is like basically Abe's own personal newspaper. But even they are saying, pointing out that most people don't feel KPG. Okay? Very important. Macro indicator, GDP 5% growth, whatever. This is very misleading if you don't look at how individuals feel, perception, especially in terms of polls. So actually, this is a bit misleading, but GDP growth is also kind of weak. This is wages, so real and nominal wages. Oh no, sorry, unemployment rate, real wages. This is 0, right? You can see the real wages from 2004 have not increased. They've actually gone down between 10 and 2014. They're basically flat. So although nominally, because there's inflation, slight inflation, it's gone up a little bit under a bit. The real wages, the amount of money you have to spend in your pocket has not really increased. The unemployment rate has improved. Okay. Another thing that Abe wanted to do with Abenomics was to fight deflation, right? Deflation is prices getting less and less and less. To trigger healthy inflation. Has there been inflation with core consumer prices? Well, it's been 0, it's gone up a little bit. Boom, it's gone up, but this is basically the result of consumption tax. 5% became 8%, so all the prices of things increased. If you get rid of this consumption tax part, core consumer prices have remained relatively flat. Deflation has not been overcome. Nominal GDP deflator, but the idea is GDP growth has been relatively weak, and the actual size of Japan's economy has actually started to shrink when you include GDP deflator. Okay, so Abenomics started out with a great fanfare, very exciting, all these promises, but has it delivered? Not very well. Especially when you come to the perception of average Japanese workers. Some sectors, some individuals, some companies are doing very well, and there are many, many more millionaires and billionaires being born by the day, thanks to the stock market and thanks to certain sectors doing very well. But the average voter, most Japanese, are not feeling it. There are other problems which haven't been really resolved. Womenomics we'll talk about later. We talked about nuclear, U.S. ties with the U.S. We'll talk about that in another section. And of course, it's nationalism, which we'll talk about in another section. Okay. More recently, and this is a slide I added just this morning, there has been some problems or some issues in the news, in the global news, when talking about Japan, about how the government is managing. These three things are connected. The state secrecy law in 2013, the Kyobozai law, conspiracy law, which just was passed last week, right? Upper house. These two are sort of measures taken by the Abe government to strengthen the state, strengthening the state in terms of limiting the leaks, so-called, of state secrets and vital information, making it very strict. If you leak so-called state secrets, you can be put in prison for 10 years. That's passed in the law in 2015. The other one is a conspiracy law, which gives powers to the government, to the police, to punish people who plan to commit a crime. Not those who have actually committed, but if you plan to, if you're seen as planning to commit some crime and it's very loosely defined, you can be charged and put in prison. So this is criticized as giving excessive police powers and threatening civil liberties and withholding important information from the public, which you need to keep the government accountable. There's also been a lot of reporting outside of Japan, less in Japan, that the Abe government is putting a lot of pressure on the media to stay in line, to not be criticizing Abe and his policies, to try and gag the media, basically. A number of very high, important, famous TV newscasters had to step down. They retired after there was protest from the LDP government as to how they're reporting on LDP policy. And you can see, very shocking, in 2010, 2010, Japan was 11th in the world ranking for freedom of press, 11th. And 2016, it's 72. It's shocking collapse in how Japan is seen. It's a French agency, respected agency, that is putting out this ranking, and it was a big news. So what is happening to the media? The media is not independent, the media is not checking the government. 72 is lower than South Korea, is lower than Tanzania. It's really quite shocking. When you think about quality of democracy, all of these developments, the UN Human Rights Council, special rapporteur, person who goes and checks countries, members of the UN, whether they're respecting human rights, wrote reports criticizing the Japanese government, saying they're not respecting freedom of expression, and these laws, conspiracy law, state secrecy law, is curtailing civil liberty. It's making the state, the government, too strong. And this is at risk of taking away freedoms of expression and freedom of assembly of individuals, okay? So, it's been in the news a bit. David Kay wrote a report, and then the Abe government fought back and said, no, this UN reporter has no idea, and said, attack the reporter. So this is not just an individual. This is a representative of the UN Human Rights Council. So it's quite serious stuff. There's also been, of course, in the news a lot of these scandals, which are not confirmed, but very suspicious of the Prime Minister and his connections to certain individuals who run schools, which is in the news, which involves cronyism. Cronyism is when you help another person, basically a friend, by giving them money or special permits in your position of power. It's not proven, of course, so it's just a scandal, it's just a suspicion, but it's questionable. So these are quite problematic. And yet, the Abe government, the support is very strong. Abe Shijiritsu 50 has gone down to 40%. So it's gone down 10-15%. Why? In a normal democracy, one would think these kind of things would make the government plunge, but no. Well, it's difficult to understand why, but I think primarily it's the opposition. The Yato is too weak. There's no real challenge. And of course, the media is also very weak in terms of reporting on these problems. Okay, so I don't know. I can't predict what's going to happen, but as it seems, the Abe government will continue on track, whether it can deliver. The next election is in 2018. So general election 2018. Next lower house election is It's like the 9th, so there's still a lot of time. Okay. So that's that for this week. For next week, I want you to read the instructions for your final paper that I'll upload on classes. Okay. I will also upload some articles that you can read for the next topic. Next week's topic is local and central relations. And local government, and the question of Kasoka and Kahoku and all of this. So it should be a fun topic. Please try and read the articles and have a good week. Finally, does anybody have my textbook? If anybody wants to borrow a textbook, they can come up. I have 2 copies. We won't use the textbook